Let me welcome all of you to Chat with Matt. I'm Matt Budd. They tell me I'm chairman of the Financial Executives Networking Group, a little hobby of mine I've been engaged in for a little over 25 years. Chat with Matt is my purpose in creating Chat with Matt was to find people who had something that I thought would be relevant for all of you to hear about. And we have as our guest today, Larry Stybel. Larry and I don't know where we met, but we've known each other since 1998. So that predates the MIT CFO Summit, although I've seen you there several times. It's been my practice that I let my guests introduce themselves, because when I've been introduced at meetings, people always butcher my introduction. So, Larry, why don't you start and give us your 90-second or 2 or 3 minute announcement about who you are and how you got to this place.
Well, I would say professionally, I stand on the intersection between psychology, entrepreneurship, and corporate governance. So on the psychology side, I'm a licensed psychologist. I work at a clinic. I work with children who've got obsessive compulsive disorder issues. I'm a cognitive behavior therapist. I write every month on leadership and psychology today. So that's one part. Second part is I started with my partner, Marianne Peabody, 2 companies. One is called Stybel Peabody, where we do career management and leadership development and retained searches only at the C-suite level. And then we also have another company called Board Options, and that's where the governance part comes in, where we do board of director retained searches, and then we work with nominating governance committees. So my background is totally unfit for 99% of everything, except messy family businesses that are dealing with leadership succession.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of work with family businesses. We do a lot of work with law firms on leadership succession, as the moving a managing partner out and moving the new generation of leaders in. So that's what we're known for. This talk today is really based on the work we're doing on what we call Chapter 3.
Right. So you mentioned you do a lot of work with law firms. Do you find chief financial officers are much different than lawyers? Is there some behavioral aspects we should be aware of?
No, they're going to be very similar. And later on, let me talk about the similarities with CFOs and lawyers, because there are some similarities.
Good. No, I'd like to hear that. I enjoy hearing about people in other professions and how they interact with the world around them. And I know a lot of lawyers, so I'd be interested in your thoughts on how we do compared to them.
Yep.
But why don't we just get started here? I know what's his name, Andre Tippet.
Yep.
Is one of your favorite people, and
Yep.
He has created a model for his life that you found interesting. So why don't you share that model with us so we can get started here on this very important thing?
So one day in the 1980s, I had an opportunity to meet Andre Tippet. Andre grew up in New Jersey. He was one of 6 children, single mom raising six kids in a poor neighborhood. And he was the oldest kid, so he had to defend himself and he had to defend his brothers and sisters. So he learned to be aggressive. Well, he parlayed that into a job with an organization called the New England Patriots. In 1982, he became a member of the New England Patriots. He played for 11 seasons with the New England Patriots. Again, $1982, his salary was $1 million a year. Think about, $1 million today is okay, but 1982, wow, $1 million.
Yeah, today you can just barely scrape by on $1 million a year.
Right. In 2008, Andre was elected to the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. So he is a legend in the New England Patriots. And when I was talking with him,
if I just ask you here, 11 years is a very long time for a football player, isn't it?
11 years is a remarkably long time. Yes,
Okay. And I think that feeds into your story.
it does. And he said that when he was a player, his mother, his coach, and his agent all told him the same thing. Keep your eye on the ball. How many times have you heard that in business? Keep
Sure.
your eye on the ball. In other words, just focus on the game that we're having today. Don't focus on anything else. Andre knew that that advice was wrong, but he couldn't articulate why it was wrong. For him, if he keeps his eye on the ball, what's going to happen when he's no longer a Patriot? Because at some point, he's one injury away from ending his career. At some point, he's one loss away from getting cut and his career is over. His career could be over in an instant. Keep your eye on the ball sounded wrong to him. And so he began to articulate, what am I going to do the day after I get cut from the New England Patriots? In our term, he would say we would say chapter 3. And what Andre did was he put together a business plan on paper about what he would do the day after he got cut. And what he wanted to do was go back to a passion he had when he was a child, karate. He wanted to put together a karate school for children. And one day, 11 years later, his career as a New England Patriot football player was over. Next day, he opened up the Okinawa Karate Club in Canton, Massachusetts. And he ran it and he grew it. And guess what? If you Google Okinawa Karate Club, Canton, Massachusetts, you will see the president is so-and-so. And then when they go to the instructors, one of the instructors is Andre Tippet.
Oh, okay.
He's actually the owner of it, but he doesn't let you know he's the owner. He just lists himself as a karate instructor. And he works with children who are 4 years and older and teaching them karate.
So he actually teaches the classes too.
He is a teacher. He also, the local college is Curry College, and he works with the karate club of Curry College. So he's totally transformed himself from a aggressive football player to someone who works with children and young people, teaching them karate, which is much more a defensive art than an offensive art. And I love that story because keep your eye on the ball is one of those business cliches that sound good, but can get you into trouble. And here's what I mean by that. For my father, my grandfather, and probably your father, your grandfather, there were 3 stages in a professional life. Stage number 1, learn the game. Stage number 2, win the game. And then stage number 3, retire. Peggy was talking about an attorney she knows that is doing that. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Simple. But that model is dead. You know it's dead. It's dead for 2 reasons. First is short job tenure. You grew up thinking the safest route for a finance person to be in one company for 25, 30 years, retire from that company, because retirement savings are nicely built up slowly over time.
Back in the 70s, there were retirement plans.
That's right. But again,
even in the 90s, there were retirement plans.
But today, anybody who's a CFO has got to be thinking about this is an assignment. It's an assignment of somewhere between hopefully 2 years and 4 years, but it's going to end. It's an assignment.
A lot. If I can just put in here, one of the stories I tell is that early in your career, you work for the great corporation. Once you leave the great corporation, there's no going back. Large companies grow their own. So you hit middle age, and you start working for middle market companies, and they fall into two broad categories: good ones and bad ones. The good ones get acquired and the CFO gets fired. The bad ones go out of business and the CFO gets fired. That's why you're changing jobs all the time. And one of the core values of our group is you have to think like that.
Yeah. And also from a retirement financial point of view,
Yeah.
if your average tenure is 2 or 3 years in a company and then you get fired, and then it takes you 6 months to a year to get rehired, and then it's going to take you 6 months to start vesting in the next retirement program. You accumulate that over 20 years, you may not have enough to retire at 65.
Yeah. And there's actually no reason to retire.
Well, that's
someone this morning who's in his mid-70s and he's applying for something I'm working on. So wow.
That's the second part. And that is in the old model, which is learn the game, win the game, retire. The average age of I did some research on this. Social Security was set up in 1935.
Yeah.
Full coverage, Social Security was age 65. But the average life expectancy for a white male in 1935 was 61. So that means when you were 65, you were old. You were decrepit old. And that's what Social Security was designed for. Now, 88 years later, what are we looking at? The life expectancy of a white male is 79 years old. But, and this is the important but, this 18 years of age is not 18 years of old age. It's elongation of middle age.
Right. Yeah, that's
when Matt and I were kids, when somebody was 65, you expected to see them at the Golden Age Center, playing mahjong or cards and
yeah.
But now when somebody's 65, they can't wait for the snow so they can go skiing. 65 is not what it used to be. So we have short job tenure, and then we have elongation of middle age. And so the traditional model for how you're going to manage your life is totally different. And instead of learn the game, win the game, retire, it's now learn the game, win the game, and decide what the next game you want to play for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and you can have chapter 3, 4, and 5.
And that's what Andre Tippet did. He didn't say my career is over when I'm finished with football. He said, I'm going to go to the next chapter, and he defined the next chapter while he's in chapter 2. Yeah. And again, this is
my wife and I were having a very interesting discussion this weekend on the definition of elderly.
I mean, this is why, this is an old financial thing. When's the best time to ask a bank for a loan? When you don't need one. And when's the worst time to ask a bank for a loan? When you do. When's the best time to be designing chapter 3 in your life? When you don't need to design chapter 3. And that's exactly what Andre Tippet did. In the middle of his football career, he's keeping his eye on the ball and off the ball at the same time. And it worked out for him. It will work out for you. Keep your eye on the ball and off the ball. Design your chapter 3 while you're in the middle of chapter 2. Don't wait until you have to design it. Now, that's the big picture.
Yeah, please.
And let me talk about
more details for us.
Let me talk about the dynamics, and this is going to get into how CFOs and lawyers are the same. We work with senior executives, and we work with professional athletes. And what we find is the dynamics are very, very similar. As when we work with a professional athlete on chapter 3, they first want to pivot. Now, for a professional athlete, a pivot means as follows. Oh, okay, I'll no longer be playing basketball, so I'll do basketball commentary for ESPN. Or oh wait, if that doesn't work out, I'll be a basketball coach at my local college. That's a pivot. In other words, it's a very. Then they find out. Guess what? ESPN has all the basketball commentators they need. They don't need any more. Thank you very much. And the local college says, we'd love to have you on the faculty, but you need to have a PhD. And then you find, oh, the pivot is not going to work. That then precipitates an existential crisis of what am I going to do? Who am I? Because again, we live in America, and in America, you tap any stranger on the shoulder and you say, tell me about yourself. You can predict that they are going to lead off with their job title.
Yes, for sure.
About that, if you went to France or Greece, that may not be the case. You might get something else. But in America, that's what, because in America, you are what you do. And if you're no longer a basketball player, then who are you? Now, in business, and I'm talking specifically about CFOs, I see the same thing. CFOs initially want to pivot. And a pivot for a CFO goes something like this. I know, I'll be on a board. Hey, I'd be great on a board. I could be chairman of the audit committee. Or you know what? If that doesn't work out, I will coach other CFOs. Yeah, I'd really be a good coach. I'll do that. That's the pivot. Lawyers, the same thing. I could be on a board, or I could coach other lawyers. They think the same thing.
I think there's, if I can just interrupt you for a second, there's a big misunderstanding about, there's certainly a lot of board seats out there in the world of private equity, for example, but they're very hard to find.
And it's all networking.
Yeah.
But again, what happens is CFOs then find you're not going to be hired because you're a CFO. You're going to be hired despite your being a CFO. Because the audit committee is only one committee of a board. There's also the compensation committee, nominating governance committee. There's also strategy. The board has to consider strategy. The board has to consider evaluating the CEO's performance. How are you going to help on the strategy side? The problem when you're a CFO is that you have a negative connotation of that you live on the liability reduction side of life. And you don't live on the asset enhancement side of life. I find that people will be interested in CFOs if they're the rare CFOs. If they're the common CFOs, they're going to be dismissed out of hand. It's the same problem with lawyers. Lawyers tend to be focused on the liability reduction side of life rather than the asset enhancement side of life. And so they're often thought of as poor additions to boards of directors. The second is I've never met a general counsel of a company that's excited about having another lawyer in the boardroom. And
interesting. Okay.
And the thing about lawyers, they can, if they don't want something, they'll find a good rationale why it shouldn't be.
Yeah, but I would confirm, my experience has also been CFOs and lawyers are very risk averse.
Yeah,
I've had discussions over the years with people I know about CFOs becoming presidents of companies, and I'm personally not a big fan of that because we know all the reasons why not, and you have to be a little bit crazy to start and run a company.
Yep, that's right. The other thing that CFOs and
I was trying to think of the quote. Let's see. Now it blew out of my mind, but it's something about great leaders have a poorly developed sense of fear.
Yeah. Well, again, if you're a CEO and if you're a board member, you have to convince the board that you can think on both sides of the basic accounting equation. You're sensitive to how do we increase assets as well as how do we reduce liabilities. The stereotype is that you live on the liability side of the balance sheet and you're insensitive to the asset enhancement side. So people don't want you on the board. Again, I'm talking about for-profit companies.
Yeah.
In the nonprofit world, they're going to love you on the board if you know how to write a check. That'll be fine. But on the for-profit side, you have to show them that you're not. When we're working with CFOs, and we're positioning for boards, we have to really focus. I'm not your typical CFO. You have to work against the stereotype.
No.
And again, I also find a lot of CFOs don't understand boards as well as they think they understand boards, because let me be very specific. Let's say you're dealing with a for-profit company, and typically there's 5 to 7 members of the board, and there's 3 core committees: audit, nominating and governance, and compensation. Okay, start doing the math and you can figure this out. It means every board member is going to be on at least 2 committees. And then every board member is also going to want to rotate, because they don't want to be on the same committee for the rest of their career in the company. So you have rotation. So if you say, I could be a great board member because I could be on the audit committee, you just rule yourself out to be on a board.
Oh, okay.
You've got to show why you'd be a great board member at the full board meeting, and why you could be on the audit committee, comp committee, and nominating and governance committee. That's the same problem that lawyers face. Now, the other thing that CFOs do when they want to pivot is, okay, I'll be a coach to other CFOs. I'll teach them, my skills. I can be a great mentor to CFOs.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. And then they find out that if you're going to be a coach, you got to be able to sell business. I got to sell business. I'm not a salesman. And so they don't want to go into coaching, because if you can't sell, you can't coach.
Yeah. We're having a lot of interest within the FENG about fractional CFO work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've held 40 classes on how to start your own fractional CFO practice. And the number one topic is, you better get a book on personal selling, because you'll be doing that at least 1 day a week.
At least. And so if you have spent an entire career trying to avoid sales and you don't like sales, you're not going to be a good coach.
Or if you think you don't like sales.
Yeah, that's right.
Individual people actually get into it very well because they're sincere people. It's not the snake oil salesman.
Right.
But still, the idea of doing personal selling is contrary to what most financial people think is what they do. But they've been selling budgets, right? And being responsible and all that other. They've been selling a very tough product.
Yep.
They can do the other kind of selling.
And so we got this pivot.
Yeah.
Pivots.
So those are what you define as pivots.
But if the pivots don't work out, then what happens is our CFOs then go into an existential crisis about, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do with my life if I'm not going to be a CFO? And so that's where we would come in. And I'll give you some suggestions. Again, I want to go back to the Andre Tippet model. He began to construct his life after the Patriots while he is a Patriot. And the time for you to be constructing chapter 3 is when you're in chapter 2. And the thing I would recommend is, when Matt asked me to introduce myself to you, I said, I live in the intersection between psychology, entrepreneurship, and corporate governance. That's sort of my space. What is yours? If where do you live? Let me give you an example. Let's say you are CFO of an automobile dealership. Mm-hmm. What are the things that really excite you? What are the things that really interest you? What are the things that really motivate you? And you might say, well, I like finance. I like education. I like working with children. I like entrepreneurship. I like to start and grow businesses. So that might be your Venn diagram. This is your space. So the idea is, while you are in chapter 2, look at that Venn diagram and begin developing networks in all 3 areas. So, for example, if you like finance, fine, join a financial group like FENG. But if you like working with children and you like education and you like schools, maybe you want to get involved with your local school system as a volunteer. And then maybe if you like entrepreneurship, is there a local college that has entrepreneurship programs and helps students start businesses? So you can begin to dabble in that area. So you begin developing networks in those 3 areas. In the example that I just said, there's going to be some overlap between the 3 parts of your Venn diagram, but not a lot of overlap. In other words, there will be some people in FENG who are interested in schools and education, but the majority won't. Peggy?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, where do you see and how do you help people understand the transferability of their skills? Because I think that's what you're saying. You know, you're a financial person and you're talking about their passions, but they need to understand what they bring to the table. And I think I see too many people when I work with them that they don't see how their skills are transferable. What do you have to say about that, and how would you help them?
Again, you're raising a very important marketing issue. How are you going to position yourself in the market? And the answer to that is going to be depending on what is your target for chapter 3. And the reason I'm talking about a Venn diagram, where are you? What 3 things capture you? Where are you? Helps you to begin to think about yourself in different and creative ways. So again, I'll take myself. I gave you the Venn diagram: psychology, business, corporate governance. And then I gave an example of, I work with messy family businesses on leadership succession. So if I told you I was a psychologist, you might not have thought of me in terms of family businesses. If I said I was in entrepreneurship, you might not have thought of me in terms of succession. So think about your Venn diagram. Another thing that you may want to consider, and I'll tell you a couple of stories. I was hired by a bank during a period when banks were consolidating. And this person was the senior vice president of commercial lending for a community bank that was acquired by a much larger national bank. And he says to me, I'm never going to get a job in banking again. I mean, with the consolidation of banking, people with my skill sets, with my resume, I'm not going to get any chance. So I have to reinvent myself, but I don't know how to do that. So we gave him something called the Strong Interest Inventory. That was developed by a Dr. Strong at Stanford University in 1929. It's 375 questions of your values. I would enjoy reading a good mystery book, like Indifferent Dislike. I would enjoy going to a stadium and watching a professional baseball team with my friends, like Indifferent Dislikes. 375 questions of those things.
Yeah.
Then it statistically compares your values with the values of people who say they love what they're doing and doing it well. And I said to my client, I don't understand this. You've been a credit lender in a bank, but according to this strong inventory, your interests are very similar to farmers. And he laughed. He says, "Oh, I can explain that. My father was a farmer. I grew up on a farm. To me, farming is relaxing and enjoyable, and I love being out in nature." I said, "Well, maybe we have the Rosetta Stone. Maybe the key is not what you do, but who you're doing it for." And so we began a journey. And to make a long story short, he now owns several. What's the name of a tractor company with well-known tractor company?
John Deere.
Yeah, John. He owns 2 John Deere distributorships. So
Oh,
he doesn't know how to fix tractors, but he likes to sell it to farmers who ride tractors. And the idea is, most of us in this room are in the service business. We may do finance as a function, but we're in the service business. Who do you like to serve? Who do you like to serve? I'll give you an example for me. I like to work with bright, impatient, curious people. Now, I live in Boston, and if I went downtown Boston and I threw a rock in the middle of the day, I'm probably going to hit somebody who's bright and impatient. That's easy. But if I add curious, that narrows it down quite a bit, because there's a lot of people in the business world who are not curious.
yeah.
I want to work with curious people. And so all my marketing materials are really organized around the articles that we've written, the speeches that we've given. And I find the people that will choose to work with us will actually read a couple of those things because they're curious. And somebody who doesn't care probably won't want to work with me. So I want to work with people who I like to be with. And think about, who do you like to be with? Who do you like to serve? And if you can't think of that, again, you can go to your college. Your college may have a career services area, and there are a number of career interest tests that you can take. One is called the Strong Interest Inventory. One is called the Campbell Interest Inventory. And most colleges and universities will give it to you as an alumni for free. And see what the statistics say. Who are the kinds of people you love to be with?
I think it's very important that people just think about what they might want to do and try them out. You gave for an example of working with kids or doing something totally out of the realm of what you normally do. You need to try it out a little bit. You need to put time on your schedule to try it out.
Yeah, I've met so many CFOs who say, "Look, I'm a CFO. What I do is I do balance sheets, income statements. I work with the numbers. I really don't care what the product is. I really don't care what the customer is, because I don't deal with that.
Yeah.
I deal with the numbers, so it doesn't matter to me." Well, it does. It should.
Yeah. I think people really need to figure out what it is they do. Peggy's, of course, the master of reinvention. She's on her 4th or 5th career. I'm not even sure. I lost count at some point. And she does a lot of things at once. And I think I think some of the hangups, and maybe you want to comment on this, I think people get hung up on the money. And your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th career, sometimes you don't make as much money as you used to. And that's okay. And I think it's hard to come to terms with that sometimes.
Yeah, and again, there's we have a mental model in our heads about there's this thing called the ladder of success, and the ladder has a certain shape, and you're climbing the rungs of the ladder, and it's only going in one direction, and that's up. So you're either moving up the ladder or you've fallen off the ladder. That whole model is going to drive you crazy, because it's no longer a ladder. It's much more, I would compare it to, you're skiing down a mountain. And there's parts of the mountain that are going to be icy, and parts of the mountain that are going to be with snow, and parts of the mountain will be filled with trees. And the idea is, how do you zigzag in the different terrains as you're going along? And that's your career. It's not about ladders. It's about skiing.
No, I think that's the mental picture is the ladder, right? Always going up, never going down. That's the same on the employer side. People who have had really big jobs, it's hard for them to get another job because people don't believe they can scale back.
Yeah. The other thing is
they'll be happy. It's amazing how employers are very concerned about your happiness, isn't it?
When I started consulting, I would work with CFOs, and they say, should I go into consulting?
Mhm.
Today, the question no longer is, should I go into consulting? The question is, when I go into consulting, will I make enough money?
Yeah, and the word enough is a tricky word.
And yeah,
people are at different stages of their life, and they don't pick up on that. So at some point, you really don't need to be making that much money because you're not going to be traveling 7 days a week. So it's okay. You might want to stay alive for a while and enjoy your family and friends.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a cut in income, but does it really matter at that point in your life?
Yeah. There's a wonderful book out, and I'm blanking on its name, but I wrote an article about it in Psychology Today. If any of you send me your emails, I'll send you the article. But he talks about, for people who, some people are success addicts, just like there are drug addicts and alcohol addicts. They're success addicts. They need the exhilaration of feeling of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like any addict, it changes. And then it's the fear that somebody else is going to be smarter than me, more creative than me, and have more energy than me. And the answer is, as you get older, particularly as you get beyond your 50s, the answer is, of course, there are going to be people who are going to be smarter than you, more creative than you, have more energy than you, and they will overpay. They will take over from you. And you can either resist that or ignore it, or you can say, this is life. And now I'm going to go to this next stage. And instead of trying to be the most successful player I can, let me be the best mentor that I can to the next generation.
Yeah.
The example that he uses in the book, which I think is an excellent one, is Johannes Brahms, as a young man, was a well-known composer, like top of the charts. And then as he got into his 40s and 50s, other younger composers began to supplant him, including his own son. Rather than getting depressed and angry, Johannes Brahms then said, okay, this is the way it is. I'm going to teach the next generation of composers. And so he started being a teacher. And he then composed some things as educational materials, and those compositions for educational materials have actually become more popular than some of his regular things.
Yeah, life is full of surprises.
But he made the transition from the best player to being the best coach.
Larry, that book is From Strength to Strength.
That's it. Yes.
Arthur Brooks.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you. All right, so we're 20 minutes still. We can open it up to questions unless you have other material you want.
Let's open.
I just think, just to chime in here and build on what you've been saying, it's just very important that people do a little experimentation. I joke, this whole gender stuff. I identify as a CFO. Okay, that's how I think. Okay, that's what I do. I can smell the money, and so I'm involved in a lot of things. I got into it kind of when I was chief financial officer of an advertising agency. It was very important to me to understand my client's business as well as my own. because I had to know whether I was going to get paid. So when I lost that job in the early 90s, I was doing consulting work, and it was very easy for me to talk to somebody and figure out the metrics of their business, because I've been doing it with all my clients for the previous 10 years. But, as you move along, it's important to experiment a little bit. There are people who have no hobbies, right? And have no outside interests other than work. And they have to, I think part of what you're telling us is you need to get some.
That's the Andre Tippet issue. Keep your eye on the ball is dangerous advice.
Yeah. So questions, the chat box is open. Otherwise, Larry and I are going to keep talking. So CFOs that you've met who have been successful at this transition thing.
The CFOs that I have met who have been successful had an image of themselves beyond their careers.
Ah, okay.
And like one person that I'm thinking about was CFO of a series of technology companies that he grew, and then it would sell, and then he would, just do it again and again and again. Sometimes he was successful, sometimes not. But his passion was sailing.
Mm-hmm.
And he moved to Florida and basically worked for a sailboat maintenance company. And he wasn't a CFO. He just wanted to be around boats. He liked boats. He liked fixing boats, and he was at a point where he didn't care what his title was.
Mm-hmm. No.
But he had something to do and a reason for getting up in the morning.
I would share with you. I just thought about it while you were talking, but I can tell you over my entire career, I was always overly helpful to the people around me. It was my belief that if I could help somebody who was struggling with a small problem, I could get them back to work. So, small example, I always told, I started work before there really were computers, right? So over the years, as people have been messing around with their computers, I would tell them, if you're having a problem, and the accounting department got the computers first. So I was the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. And I would tell people, if you're having a problem with your computer, call me before you screw it up too bad. But my goal in doing that was to make sure they got back to work and earning some money for the company.
Yeah.
And, within the networking group, that's what I do. I help people who are struggling with this problem of trying to find a job. They don't know what the issues are and how this whole thing works, because most of them in middle age have never been out of work.
I think you get to this point in life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not about age; it's really about responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you in terms of your children, your education of your children? Have they left the nest? Are they still in the nest? So again, depending on, that's not an age issue; it's a social responsibility issue. But assuming the kids are no longer an issue,
Mm-hmm.
then you're free to think about developing your epitaph and not developing your resume. This was something that I didn't create this. It was a New York Times columnist named Brooks coined the term. And that is, a resume is really so designed to be impressive in terms of a business thing. The epitaph is, when you die, what are people going to say about you? When you're no longer here, what are the memories that people are going to have about you? Do you really want people to say, Kathleen really knew how to add numbers?
Yeah.
Is that what Kathleen wants people to say at her funeral, or is it something else? And think about that, and let that drive your chapter 3.
I have two
the
things.
people-
First, I want to
Right.
ask you a question, and then there's a question in the chat box that if you could repeat the tools that you were talking about, I guess somebody, that they could find as far as looking at their careers.
Sure. Again, I recommended to go back to the college you graduated from, go to the career office or maybe alumni affairs and ask if they have any career interest tests. That's what it's called, career interest tests. These are not personality tests, they're career interest tests. The major ones are the STRONG, STRONG, Strong Interest Inventory. The next one is called the Campbell, CAMPBELL, the Campbell Inventory. There may be others, but those are the two major ones that I'm aware of.
Good. All right, so let's move
Okay,
on to the
and
next
my-
question,
and-
Peggy. Summer.
Yeah, and my other comment or question was, younger people today, earlier generations, are looking more at work-life balance than our generation was. And I think that's why we're so hyper-focused on who we are. I am a CFO, I am a whatever, because that's how we identify ourselves. And a lot of people never really have a lot of outside interest because they're so driven by work. And so I wonder if this advice is to, are the younger people who have a work-life balance are they going to be able to go into chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4 more easily? My question to you. And secondly, is if you're, still in chapter 2 and just starting plan, is increasing your work-life balance another way to start to help you understand your passions and who you like to be with and ways to create chapter 3? Those are kind of two questions.
Yeah, the answer to the last question you raised is easy, and that is it depends on the company you're working with. If you're CFO of a Fortune 500 company, or even if you're CFO of a private equity portfolio company, you may want to have work-life balance, but it ain't going to be in the job. It's not about you. It's also about the demands of the job. It just may not be there. With respect to the generational issues, absolutely. There's, again, in our generation, I'm talking about Matt and me. If you have a resume, you've got 2 years here, 2 years here, 3 years here, 2 years. Something's wrong with you. You can't get traction anywhere. What's the matter with you? I'm finding for younger people, that's the traditional resume that they're getting, and it's working. Again, we're living in a different world where short job tenure is shorter and shorter.
Even for, as I mentioned earlier, for the folks past middle age, they change jobs a lot. And I talk to clients all the time about not to take that too seriously, because it's not the people, it's the companies. But I like the work-life balance issue. That is something new. No one told me about that when I started out.
Well, yeah, but again, I think my own perspective is work-life balance is a trap. It's a trap in the sense that it looks at the concept of balance, implies that you can make trade-offs and that it can all balance out. And I find it's relatively rare in life that happens. On the other hand, if you can combine activities so that doing one activity has multiple pings, then that's good. I'll give you an example from my own life. We had one daughter, and it was very important in terms of our value that she goes to church and goes to Sunday school. It was very important in terms of our values that we be perceived as involved in the church. Fine. That's a life balance, that's a life decision.
Mhm.
But I also had a business to run. And so I said, I looked at who are the people on the different church committees. And that I found that on the education committee, there were 3 presidents of relatively large institutions that were on these committees. So I volunteered to be on the education committee.
Oh,
So my involvement in the education committee achieved 2 goals at the same time. One is I was doing the right thing for my family and being consistent with my values, and I was also developing the business relationships at the right level. And one of the presidents of one of the banks became a client of mine, and that bank became a really good client. So it was the synergy.
yeah,
It was not work versus life. It was how do I get 2 first?
yeah, good point. So we have something in the chat box about a lawyer and investment banker who he's 54 and looking for what he can do in his next life to be productive. I know that's kind of a broad thing. Anil, if you want to chime in here, you're certainly welcome to explain it better than I've explained it.
Well,
Sure, Matt.
again, if the question is what can I do in my next life to be productive, I said the definition of productive is up to you, not me, to define. And again, all I'm saying, where are you in terms of your social responsibilities? If you still have kids that you're trying to fund through college, that may bias you in a certain direction. If your kids are out, that may take you in another direction. If your family is healthy, that's one thing. So there's too many what ifs. In terms of process to help you figure out, one is, if you can't think of anything, think about these career interest tests to help give you a statistical numerical number about your values in relationship to people in other jobs. For example, at this stage of my life, suppose it says my values are very similar to surgeons. Does that mean I'm going to go to medical school and be a surgeon at this stage of my life? Probably not. But could I develop a product or service that allows me to help surgeons in being better leaders? Yes, I could do that. So, interpret the test of not what should I be, but who should I be palling around with? Who should I be helping?
Kathleen has a comment, Larry. She says, I tell my clients that before there's a job opening, there's a problem. And she comments that you should look for who has problems you can fix, become a detective, and let your network know where you would be of value. So as you're looking for the next chapter, where can you're looking for what are the problems that you can bring to solve because of whatever your skills and or passions are, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And again, the idea about trying to define yourself in terms of multiple values, your Venn chart, can also help you network with different people in different networks, because the people who are CFO type people will have one network, and people who are interested in education, there's going to be some overlap, but not a lot of overlap. So the more diversification in networks you have, consistent with your Venn diagram, the better it is. And then finally, I'm thinking about do some thinking about what do you want people to say about you after you're dead? What do you want? What messages do you want to leave after you? So that's an existential question. What is my mission in life? At this stage of my life, what is my mission in life? And so you can have much more purpose in life.
Yeah, I think people don't look at, I joke around that, I'm the master of in the box thinking. So what does that mean? Everybody's out of the box thinking. Well, in the box thinking is a lot of people don't look around and see what's in their box, what they really know how to do. And they oftentimes know a lot more than they think they do. If they really focus on what it is they do and what they like, and what they're good at, there's a lot of other things there that are not necessarily obvious.
Larry, going back to that work-life balance and what you're saying about what are people going to say about you? I mean, we hope that when we're gone, they're not going to say, well, he was a great CFO. We hope that they're going to talk about value that you brought to relationships, value that you brought to an organization, beyond that skills thing that you learned when you went to college or when you practiced your craft. So I think that goes to that work-life balance. Who are you? What are you offering to people? And then of course, how can you use what you offer in the next chapter of your life?
And the issue to also understand who you are at this stage of your life may not be the same as who you were.
Of course. Well, I hope not. I hope we've all grown. If we are the same today as we were when we started our careers, I don't think we've grown very much.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that we all see ourselves growing and changing for the better, because that's what life and experience brings to the table. It gives us that opportunity to flourish and to come out of our cocoon.
People don't always understand that life has changed for them.
Right.
Not always good, not always bad, but it has changed. And their needs, requirements, ideas of what they're going to do going forward for that next chapter needs to change too.
Let me suggest a concrete exercise that you and your significant other can do. And that is go in separate rooms, sit down in front of a computer or a blank sheet of paper, and write an ideal day in an ideal life 5 years from now. And start with, I wake up. And describe this ideal day in detail. In other words, when you wake up, who's next to you in bed? When you wake up and your feet touch the ground, what's the floor? Is it carpet? Is it wood? What kind of wood? Is it tile? What kind of tile? When you look out the bedroom window, what do you see when you look out the bedroom window? And then go in that kind of excruciating detail throughout the entire day of this perfect day. Don't make it a weekend, make it a weekday. 5 years from now. So you have a model for what your life would love to be. And then ask your significant other to read what he or she wrote, and you share what you wrote. How far off are you? More likely than not, the two of you are going to be pretty much in sync in terms of what the ideal thing would be, but there'll be opportunities for discussion. And remember,
we're at the 5 o'clock mark, and I try to end meetings on time as well, but perhaps there's some things we didn't cover that you want to summarize for us in closing.
I think in closing we are in a new chapter of life that no generation before has ever experienced. So there are no clear models for what is effective. And the chapter that we have to deal with is called short job tenure and elongation of middle age. And you can't look at your mother, your father, your grandparents as role models because they lived in a different era. We're inventing this new era as we are speaking. And what we've been talking about are suggestions to begin thinking about how are you going to manage in an era of short job tenure and long middle age?
One of the things I discuss when I have my how to build your own fractional CFO and consulting practice, one of the things I discuss at length is the importance of being able to work as long as you want to work. If work is what defines you, and as you get further along the timeline, if you have 4 or 5 clients, maybe you only want 4, 3 or 4, then maybe you only want 2 or 3. Something to keep your mind active, different problems in different places. But also, I think, to your point, Larry, you want to look outside of how you define yourself and think of other things that you can do with your life. It's important. You know, a lot of people, they think, oh, well, when I retire, I'm going to play tennis every day. Well, guess what? You've gotten older and you really can't play tennis every day. People have knee replacements and they can't do it anymore. Now what?
And I think for those,
you better have a plan.
And for those of you who are CFOs that are dealing with businesses that are looking to be acquired, I think it's really important that the founder have a clear idea what Chapter 3 is going to look like for the founder. Because one of the things I've seen from a business point of view many, many times is that if the founder doesn't have a clear idea what's going to happen on the other side of the transaction, the founder will have an easy way of screwing up the deal at the last minute.
Yeah, because of fear of retiring. Larry, I just want to thank you so much. I try to plan out these chats with Matt, and now I have to think of something even better, and that's going to be really hard. You've set the bar very high, Larry. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I thank all of you for signing up for Chat with Matt. I will come up with something else, and I hope you'll join me at that time. So Larry, thank you so much. And you have Larry's email if you want to write to him on something we discussed. But again, thank you all so much for joining me on Chat with Matt. The meeting's being recorded, so you can tell people that they missed it, and they can catch it in the reruns. Larry, again, thank you so much, and everyone have a great evening. Stay safe, and we'll be talking on Chat with Matt.